Three of the most admired ancient elite military units. Ancient societies were no strangers to warfare. But history reveals that only very few fighting bodies can be considered the elite military units of the ancient world. History reveals several ancient elite military units that have been celebrated for their remarkable prowess and achievements, from warriors fighting for ancient Persian kings to crack members of the Roman military. Societies in the ancient world had an intimate relationship with warfare. Indeed, for many of them, war, with all its opportunities and dangers, was as much a part of life as cultivation, trade, or city building. Many civilizations of the ancient world had an attitude and acceptance of conflict that might surprise us today, with those such as the Romans holding warfare at the very heart of their psyche and identity. For some societies, warfare was an essential part of survival, for others an expression of culture, and for still others, a necessary aspect of their imperial economic and political aspirations. Many states engaged in warfare politically, some for purely financial reasons, while others were compelled by cultural drivers. Of all the many nations that made war, several ancient elite military units became famous for their performance and value, and we can read tantalizing details about them that have come down to us through ancient sources. Any selection of ancient elite military units must inevitably be highly subjective. How could it not be? In selecting the units below, I have sought to make a broad selection from across the ancient world. I have also limited myself to elite units rather than elite warrior nations, like the Spartans, or elite armies like those of Alexander, Hannibal, or the Romans. Although a number of historical sources mention the units we will look at, many ancient accounts are incredibly light on detail, and there is so much that we don't know about how these warriors lived, worked, and fought. The Immortals of Persia. The first of our ancient elite military units comes from the Achaemenid Empire, c. 550 to 330 BCE, of mighty Persia. As a civilization, this was a true powerhouse of the ancient world, dominating many nations in what we now call the Middle East and Asia Minor. The unit that concerns us is the famed elite guard of the Persian kings, the Immortals. A picked body of purely Persian-born troops that served the King of Kings as both an elite bodyguard and as a formidable battlefield reserve. Also known as the 10,000, this was a hand-picked unit of men that was consistently replenished to replace any losses, never diminishing. They were in a collective sense immortal, and we learn of them mainly through their prominent role in King Xerxes' invasion of Greece in the 5th century BCE. Although Xerxes could call upon seemingly endless nations of men to join his vast armies, it is clear that the Immortals formed the prestigious nucleus of his forces. This body was a true elite, both socially and militarily. Famous within the Persian army for their status, prestige, and fighting qualities, it is also clear that Herodotus himself, the so-called father of history, was fascinated with them. In battle, their most iconic engagement came when the Immortals were used as shock troops in an attempt to force the pass of Thermopylae from the indomitable Spartans. The Immortals did not overcome the far heavier hoplite armor and formidable defense of the Spartans and their allies, but that does not diminish their status as the best troops from a mighty empire and a great army. Long after the Persian Wars, later Greek sources also mentioned the Immortals. Xenophon mentions them in his Cyropaedia, written 370 BCE. Though the work is in parts fanciful, the subject is real, and Xenophon claims that Cyrus the Younger formed his palace guard from the finest warriors of his army. Xenophon himself fought as a hired mercenary for the Persian prince, and it seems likely that his observations were well informed. The Sacred Band of Thebes. The next of our ancient elite military units is truly unique in the ancient world. From ancient Greece, the Sacred Band of Thebes was one of the most distinctive ancient elite military units, based upon a unique warrior ethos. The Sacred Band of Thebes were elite hoplites, unique in both ancient and world history. The band was recruited from 150 pairs of male lovers, warrior couples selected by the city-state of Thebes for their devotion to one another, an older man paired with a younger male. The concept followed a Greek cultural ideal, with older men guiding and teaching younger males, who both learned and sought to live up to their devoted lovers. Focusing on an idealized concept of love, the ancient Greeks believed that the devotion of these couples would foster an esprit de corps that would never falter on the battlefield. The idea was that neither the older nor the younger partner could bear the shame of retreating or surrendering in the eyes of their lover. This was not a novel idea in wider Greek culture, and it is given voice in Plato's Symposium, written in the 360s BCE. This was a powerful idea, and that a sacred element of the unit was a reference to the religious oaths that each warrior took in fidelity to his lover. These strengthened bonds even further and lent a religious aspect to the warrior's commitment. The effect of such powerful forces was clearly strong and highly prized by the Thebans. The sacred band was organized by the Theban commander Gorgidas in 378 BCE. Handpicked for their prowess, physiques, and fighting qualities, recruits embarked upon a physical training regime of wrestling, horsemanship, and even dancing that was designed to foster an elite and highly bonded unit. Although couples were originally dispersed throughout the ranks of the army, it was later decided to create a singular body of lovers that fought as a single battlefield unit. The sacred band came about at a time in Greek history when Thebes successfully challenged the established hegemony of mighty Sparta. They played a role in several important conflicts. 378 BCE saw them in action in the Boeotian War against invading Spartan forces. In 375 BCE, at the Battle of Tedra, the band were part of an army that defeated a larger Spartan force and put them to flight. An achievement that hadn't been seen for many generations. The sacred band also fought in the decisive Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE, led by its commander Pelopidas, and under the generalship of the famous Theban commander Epaminondas. However, in historical terms, the dominance of Thebes and its sacred band was not long-lived, and by 338 BCE Theban forces were defeated at the pivotal Battle of Chaeronea. Philip II of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, ushered in a new era of Macedonian dominance. The sacred band, who were faithful to their sworn bonds, were entirely wiped out. Alexander's companion cavalry. Looking to the next of our ancient elite military units, we must now shift our attention to a Macedonian unit that we know fought the Thebans at Chaeronea, part of a legendary army that went on to change the entire ancient world. Of all Alexander the Great's highly effective Macedonian troops, few units commanded a position of greater esteem or impact than the companion cavalry, the hetairoi. This was a body of elite horsemen, hetairoi meaning literally, those closest to the king, who fulfilled the role of both a royal household guard and elite mounted shock troops of the Macedonian army. The true spear point of the Macedonian combined forces, the companion cavalry, were the elite of all the cavalry units within the army and were led by Alexander in person. They were traditionally deployed on the right of the battle line and frequently at the point of maximum offensive impact. While the massed phalanxes of Macedonian pikemen, wielding their deadly 18-foot-long sarissas, were crucial in closing with and pinning the bulk of the enemy, it was the highly mobile companions who traditionally dealt the killer blow, charging, often in wedge or diamond formation, at weak points in the enemy line or outflanking and cutting off their rear. These were no spear-wielding grunts but rather the true fighter pilots of their day. Reaching the height of their prowess by the time of Philip II, the true architect of the Macedonian army, the companions in the time of Alexander were organized into 8 squadrons or ilia. Each outnumbered between 200 to 300 troops and was made up of highly skilled and capable horsemen. The Royal Isle, led by the king himself, formed an elite unit within the horse guard, an elite within an elite. For rulers like Philip and Alexander, who were nothing short of warrior kings, the companions also constituted something of a mobile court, and many of the ruler's closest friends, nobles, and allies made up its ranks. In this sense, the companions were not merely a military unit, they were also a central feature of Macedonian society and the court. Distinctive in their iconic Boeotian-style helmets, they were protected by a breastplate or cuirass, armed with a spear, xyston, and short sword, either a kopis, a curved slashing sword, or a xiphos, a cut and thrust sword. The Macedonian cavalry represented a true departure from traditional Greek warfare, which had commonly relied on the hoplite phalanx, Greek states, barring Thessaly, being generally weak in the cavalry arm. The companions were initially captained by General Philotas, under Alexander, but following his fall from favor, Alexander made a decision to split the command between Clitus the Black and his intimate friend and lover, Hephaestion.